Hey everybody, welcome to another video. We are on April 25th, I believe, in the season, and we are kind of hitting the end of the really cold nights. We may have had our last frost, but that's unsure. We typically will have one again in May sometime. But the forecast is looking pretty warm, and we just did pass a wave of cold weather, a cold front that came through. And so we are getting ready to put another wave of plants out into the garden, move all these protections, these low caterpillar tunnels, which are on top of things that went out much earlier, remove them because those are bigger, they can withstand the cold temperatures, put those covers on more new delicate things, just keep rolling along. We're doing a lot of bed prep right now. We're staying on top of the weeds, which is one of our big priorities this year. We're putting down a ton of compost. We got another delivery, another semi of compost, and we're just laying that down really strong and heavy this year. And just a lot of routine work, trying to stay on top of it. Sam, one of our workers who was here last year, you may remember him, he arrived, so we have another worker, which is helpful as the workload's slowly starting to ramp up. And we'll be moving over to Osprey Wilds, the other farm that we manage, and doing a bunch of things there. And chicks will be arriving pretty soon, and the pasture will start ramping up. Sam is going to be in charge of the pasture operations this year, and so with his arrival will come a whole bunch of transitions and changes in the pasture. So a lot is happening, as always, a lot of basic routine stuff that we are trying to stay disciplined and stay on top of before it gets out of control, and keep that momentum headed in the right direction. But yeah, basic spring stuff, and just temperatures going up. The inclination of the sun is rising. It's rising earlier in the morning, it's setting later at night, and a lot of daylight, a lot of solar energy and warmth into the ground, and a lot of growth too. So that's exciting for crops, and it's exciting for pastures. It's a little nerve-wracking when the weeds start to sprout, but so far we're on top of it. So let's go look around, see what's happening in real life, and just see how things have progressed since last week. In one sense, small changes. In another sense, another change towards that boisterous, overabundant summer that we know is coming. So let's go see how things are moving ahead. This is one of the high tunnels that had overwintered spinach in it and fresh young spinach, and you can see now that we've turned these beds over entirely, ripped out all of that overwintered spinach, put compost down, and prepped it for the next plantings. While this spinach, which is looking really delicious, very, very tender and fully sized up, is coming along really nicely. So this is our first earliest planting of spinach, and as you can see, it's great. So we're really excited to be having harvests of fresh, beautiful, nutritious greens early on in April. And you can get those in our store, so make sure you log in there and place your orders while they're available. It's really nice to have fresh greens when the stuff in the store is looking a little bedraggled. So go get some. It's looking really great. Laying down tons of compost, same thing in this bed, ripped things out, putting down compost before we replant again. So pretty exciting to already be replanting this early in the season. The arugula also looking really good and lush. We'll have some of that in the store. Not a ton yet, but it's coming along, and it's nice to have lots of different greens at this point in the season. We've also got baby kale, which we haven't always grown in the past, but it's a really nice green alternative. A lot of texture there, and really super nutritious for you. So a third kind of green is available in the garden right now. So here's a really good example of what these low caterpillar tunnels can do. Under this tunnel you can see there's a ton of brassica plants, cabbages mostly, all lined up, growing pretty well under that protection. A lot less wind, a little more heat at night, a little bit of shade, and just a generally milder climate underneath these cloth fabric tunnels. But then just outside, the end of this tunnel didn't quite reach to the end of the bed, and we have some transplants down here that are not looking so good. They got completely fried by the cold nights, and they're struggling. They're still a little bit alive, but they got pretty damaged. And that's very different from the ones up under the tunnel, which are completely fine and are growing just great. So a little fabric shelter with These basic arches that are made out of electrical conduit and then a fabric cover stretched over top and held in place with strings can give us a significant boost, because just a few cold nights can really damage some plants like these ones. But if you can protect them just for those few key hours when the temperatures drop, you can get weeks of extra growth. So that's why we're using these tunnels. We've got them all throughout the garden, covering all kinds of things. And obviously the high tunnels out there do all that stuff as well. But these are pretty easy to set up and to take down, and we can easily deploy them in the spring and get a head start with crops underneath. We also got another load of compost. So this pile is pretty big. It might be hard to tell on the camera just how big it is, but it's probably 5 feet tall and 15 feet long. It's a whole semi, 30 cubic yards. We had another pile down there, which you can see Jed taking from right now. That pile's basically gone. So this was the second load of compost, and we'll be wheeling it up into the garden and putting it on bed. So a ton of compost is going down this year, and this is probably not the last semi that we'll get over the course of the season. But again, we're really trying to boost our biology in our soil and the organic matter, bring it way up. We've dialed in the minerals. Biology is next, and we're going to see a huge response this year. I'm very confident in crop health, quality, bricks levels, flavors, colors. All of that is going to just go up significantly, which is going to be awesome because our produce was already pretty high quality, and so this is just going to take it to a level that you really don't find produce at typically. So we're excited to see that happen this year, and it all comes and starts with lots and lots of super high quality compost spread in the early spring. Here I am out in the pasture, and this is where we've been bale grazing all spring, or all winter really. You can see these areas here that have a lot of residue from the hay bales on them are where we had round bales stacked up. If you followed our blog or got our emails last fall, you would have seen the bales all set out on pasture, and we slowly, with an electrified fence, allowed the cows access to them one after another all winter long. And so they slowly had those rationed out, and they ate through them over the course of the winter. And they are way down there right now at the last 3 bales. They're eating the final hay, and they will for another week or two. And as they're finishing those bales, the new fresh green grass should be coming on strong enough for them to start grazing on it. But this area last year was one of our worst areas on the whole pasture. There's a lot of brush trying to come through. The grass was hardly in existence at all because it had been very brushy in the past. We had slowly knocked down the brush, but not a lot of grass was really coming through. A lot of bare soil, exposed soil, and just kind of scrappy weeds with brush poking through. But now after this, there's been a significant amount of manure in this area, and the residue from the hay that's wasted, that's inevitably going to be wasted, has been spread out on here. So that's like a mulch of organic matter that'll be decomposing into the soil, and a ton of manure concentrated on this little swath right here. And it's gonna totally turn this area around. We've seen that again and again when we do bale grazing in other areas of our pasture, that area bounces back really, really well. So that's one of our tools that we use every winter. We winterize and bale graze in the worst areas of our pasture, and it inevitably brings those areas back and makes them really fertile and healthy. So we're gonna see that happen this spring, and you'll stay tuned. I'll just show you how it develops over the course of the season. But you know, we're working with ecological time here. These are long time cycles that you can't really rush. You only get spring and then summer and then fall and then winter, and you can't speed it up any faster than it will go. But you can make sure that you're taking every season to take the right and best action that you possibly can to move things in that season forward as far as possible. And if you string together a bunch of seasons where you are doing what's the highest leverage activity that you can, after a string of seasons like that, you've made a lot of progress. And so that's what we're trying to do. Every time we have winter and we have the opportunity for bale grazing, we're putting that where it's going to give the most bang for its buck. During the season, when the grass is growing, we're going to rotationally graze as well as we can and manage that grass and the rest periods and the regrowth as well as we possibly can, so that we can get the most grass growth and organic matter and energy down into the soil. In the fall, we're going to meter out our grass and really ration it carefully, so that again we can get the most grazing off of the ground when it's getting cold. every time we have a season, we understand what's happening in that season. We're going to use that season for what it can do for us in the best way possible. And we've seen a lot of progress on these pastures over the last couple of years. Wherever the broilers run in their pens has turned around dramatically. Wherever the cows have been winterized has turned around dramatically. Everywhere that hasn't had those heavy impacts is still making significant progress. Where we used to have almost no grass and just goldenrod and strawberry and bare dirt and sedge, we now have grass growing in a lot of those areas. Strong, thick grass with even clover popping through, which is a really, really great sign. So these fields that were worn out are being turned around, and here we are on our, I don't remember, third, fourth season here, and it's a very different place, and it will continue to be so. So stay tuned and watch that develop over the course of the season. There's a lot of storylines starting to develop here in the spring, things we want to accomplish, goals we're trying to achieve, and now is the time when they're starting, and you'll see them progress, and we'll see where we end at the end of the season. So this is an area of the pasture which we bale grazed several winters ago. I can't remember, maybe 2 or 3. One of the first ones, we put bales here and the cows devoured them, put down a lot of manure. And then it's also an area where the broiler pens have come through in the past, I think actually twice over the course of the years. So it's had more passes with those heavy manuring animal cycles than most of the other areas in the pasture. But you can see here that we've got a lot of growth. We've got leaves, grass leaves coming up pretty strong. It's very thick in here. You can't see any bare ground. You can hardly get through the thatch to the ground under there because it's just so dense with grass, and the leaves are tall, over 6 inches in some places. And that's a really good sign to be in April, second half of April, and to already have 6 inches of grass blazing up and a thick sward. Really great. Not the case everywhere. Let me go show you an area that has had very little, much less animal impact, and you'll see the difference between good management and lots of animal presence versus neglect and poor management. So this is an area where very little animal impact has come. I think the cows have come through a handful of times, but definitely not the broilers and definitely not winter bale grazing here. And as you can see, there's almost no growth. So same point in the season, tiny, less than an inch grass blades sticking up, a lot of weeds, easy to find bare dirt below. There's tons of exposed soil between these small tufts of plants that are barely growing. And there's brush trying to come back. We've cut down all of that brush once or twice, but it's still just trying to come back and shooting up those little saplings. So the cows, when they get in here, aren't that interested in the grass. They stick to the areas with better growth. So not a lot of manure is being dropped in these spots. The chickens haven't come through this area because they've gone other places, but you can see that this is more like what the grass was like when we first arrived here, and without that animal impact and that intensive conscious management by us, it doesn't progress very fast. It doesn't heal itself. It is slowly healing itself, but the process is long and it takes quite a while for significant change to happen, as opposed to the area that I showed you just a few seconds ago, where we have deliberately had animal impact at certain intervals doing very specific things for us. The sward of grass has completely transformed. It's totally different, and you're getting way more photosynthesis way earlier in the season and later in the fall as well. So a lot more solar capture going into the soil, a lot more growth, a lot more animal being fed in that time, a lot more human food being produced, and that's all, because of good management. So that's what we're hoping to do everywhere in the pasture, including these areas, over time. But again, we're working with ecological time and as many animals as we can actually sell, and as many animals as actually can be adequately managed on this property. And those are all limitations that keep us progressing at a certain pace, but we are progressing, and so that's what's important, to keep doing it over time.